welcome back to the program. This is Capital Market Live on Channels Television, your award-winning station. Now, the new president of the Association of Securities Exchanges of Africa is the CEO of Casablanca Stock Exchange. He is Mr. Karim Haji. He took over from the CEO of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, that's Mr. Oscar Onyema. And as part of his plans, he plans now to pursue product diversification in the African market by also providing capacity building for members of ASEA. Among other issues, the ASEA president wants to address hurdles to investment inflows in this continent. Let's listen to Mr. Haji.
There is clearly a need to boost investments in capacity building for both the African public sector, but also for SMEs. African economies need to focus on strengthening their competitiveness and enhance the sophistication of their capital markets. Stock exchanges are at the epicenter of unleashing the wealth that the continent holds and also of creating opportunities for investment for the retirement system and the investment needed by the private sector and infrastructure and so forth. African markets must enable merit-based allocation of resources to foster regional integration and eliminate fragmentation. Privatization of state-owned companies could unlock additional investment opportunities and funds for governments to enable them to focus on other priorities such as human capital development, but also the financing of infrastructure. However, we are facing together many challenges in attracting inflows. These challenges can be summed up as follows. First and foremost, and my friends of MSCI know that, lack of liquidity and sometimes high volatility of equity markets, high transaction costs, and also sometimes capital gains taxes in some markets, lack of sophistication of market intermediaries who need some capacity building, low product diversity. Our markets tend to be focused on basically two asset classes, equity and fixed income. Very few markets in Africa offer other products than equity and fixed income. So we need to diversify to ETFs, REITs, green bonds, you name it. So there is a great effort, and the association will be working on that under my tenure with Felix, who I'm saluting here. We need to focus on helping build capacity for all our colleagues to introduce new products. We also suffer from a limited integration of markets and also a limited integration of governance and sustainability issues in the reporting of issuers. Sometimes hostile regulation that discourages investors, and also a perception of risk which is probably higher than the actual risks that are encountered by investors on the markets. So what do we need to do to address all these issues? We need obviously to strengthen and build capacity so that we have an enabling legal and regulatory regime that is more attractive to foreign investment. There is also a need for Africa to tell its stories, even if they are difficult. Sustainable development goals typically fall under the purview of government. There should be a move towards a more inclusive approach. So exchanges have also a role to play in addressing SDG goals. SMEs, which provide the backbone of our economies, often give a perception of risk which is too high. So we need to support that with facts, because SMEs, in effect, are not that risky, but we need to work on promoting that to investors. We also need to work on inclusiveness through more digitization. We talked a lot about fintech, but also how the digital space can actually help in financial inclusiveness. Kenya is a very good example with M-Pesa. Technology can bridge the gap and ensure that information reaches the market in a timely and open manner. Policy precedes regulation to grow our markets. Exchanges should really lead the front and integrate ESG components in financial reporting of issuers. Investors are very specific on where they deploy capital, thus companies need to be cognizant of this fact. So ESG elements can help ESG companies attract more capital. Part of the effort from exchanges would be to also create indices that take into account ESG matters. So some exchanges in Africa have been successful at issuing ESG indices. That effort should be widened to all the exchange community in Africa. Companies should ensure that information being reported is useful in strategic decision-making, and we believe that ESG reporting can really leverage technology to efficiently gather information.
And that's the current president of the African Securities Exchanges Association here, who took over from Oscar Onyema of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Here's Mr. Karim Haji. Well, before we go, let's quickly look at how the African markets, most of the exchanges that we track, actually performed this week. We noted that the Nigerian Central Bank was one of the banks or central banks across the continent this week that had its MPC meeting, leaving rates unchanged. Ghana also left its own rates unchanged at 17%, with Kenya also doing the same thing, leaving its MPR at 9%. We had Zambia also doing some 9.75%. All of these had its impact on the mixed performance that we have on the companies or the exchanges that we track this period. We see the BRVM, which is the Francophone market, negative for this week by some 0.8%. The Johannesburg Stock Exchange, representing South Africa at 50,664, was negative as well, almost flat at some 0.1%. The Egyptian Stock Exchange, EGX30, settled at 13,320, but was also flat in terms of week-to-date performance. And for the Nairobi Securities Exchange, at 146 points, that market ended positive by 1.4%. And we note that with the Nairobi Securities Exchange spreads rule finally taking effect, that was announced a few weeks ago. It took effect on Monday this week as the automated trading system, which plans to incorporate the changes, comes into force. That's what we're tracking, and we'll continue to bring you updates on all of these markets on a weekly basis on Channels Television. On that note, that's the time we have this weekend for Capital Markets. Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Temple Ashaju. I'll see you next time.